Welcome back to Inside City Hall. Later this month, the MTA is expected to authorize the layoff of 200 subway station agents and attendants. Our next guest is trying to block that move any way he can, and we welcome the president of the Transport Workers Union, John Samuelsen. Thank you for coming in tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So before I get into the layoffs, I wanted to start off with the news of the day, which is the possibility that fares are going to go up yet again. Your response to that?
Well, my response to that is under this current MTA leadership, New York's working families have taken a hit, and both in terms of service cuts and now the fare increases. And the travesty of all of this is that the MTA has enough money to have not only not raise the fare increases, but to not have engaged in the service cuts that they engaged in.
Where is this money?
In 2009, the federal government gave the MTA $1.3 billion in stimulus money that was designed to either save jobs or create existing jobs. The stimulus money, out of that stimulus money, they could have used $130 million, 10%, in order to avert service cuts and the subsequent job losses that were associated with the service cuts.
But isn't some of this money, though, also, isn't it supposed to be used for capital projects?
No. The stimulus money, the law actually allowed companies like the MTA to use 10% of the stimulus money toward the operating budget. And that leaves them with $130 million that they still have sitting in a bank that they could immediately use toward averting the service cuts and lessening the pressure on New York's working families, but they refuse.
But aren't there a lot of economic factors here at play? The country is still in a deep recession. I mean, you say they have this money, but really, do they have this money to go out and prevent layoffs and prevent the fares from going up?
Absolutely. The money was designed from the beginning to save jobs or create new jobs. And it's oxymoronic. It's actually absurd for Jay Walder and the MTA to be sitting on $130 million.
But why would they want to decimate service? Which is essentially what's going on right now. There are all these subway lines being reduced, bus lines being reduced.
Why would they want to decimate service? The honest answer to that is that the MTA, in their infinite wisdom, is looking to extract concessions from TW Local 100, and they're willing to use the riding public as a gambit in their quest to crack our contract. And if that means service cuts, that means service cuts. What you tell me, or Jay Walder should tell me, why he has $130 million that he's refusing to use, if there's not some political element to this in play.
Let's talk about the station agents. More than 200 of them are likely going to be laid off at the end of this month. At this point, is there any way for you to stop that?
Yes, there is. There's a bill in Albany right now that passed the Senate with bipartisan support, the Transit Security and Safety Act, which would put a moratorium on any service cuts that the MTA is looking to make that would have an adverse effect or could potentially have an adverse effect on rider safety. And certainly the booth closings fall into that category.
Now, you only have about 2 weeks left, though. I mean, is it possible that this is all going to happen where the legislature, both houses are going to pass this, the governor is going to sign off on it?
Yes, the Senate already passed it.
You still have the Assembly, you still have the governor.
It has to go through the Assembly, and I believe the governor will support it.
What do these, I guess, when you talk to New Yorkers about what these station agents do, what do they do? Why do they still need to be around?
The station agents provide a vital layer of security as recognized by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, who's been in touch with the MTA and told them what a foolhardy decision it is to get rid of them. They interact with the police on a daily basis. You see signs all over the system. If you see something, say something. And those instructions are given to station agents, who are the primary security tool in the subway. And if they're gone, there's nobody to say anything and nobody to see anything.
And what about, though, I mean, other workers? Because you mentioned the station agents, but there are lots of other workers in the system. Is part of the problem, perhaps, that you don't get all this sympathy is people always have, I guess, a negative story about an MTA worker?
Yeah, I believe part of the reason for that, part of the reason is certainly that I've never seen a company in my life that likes to belittle its own workforce in the manner that this MTA does. But
people see these workers on a daily basis. They're forming their own opinions. I mean, I can tell you just from my own experience. Yesterday, I was at 34th Street, Penn Station, waiting for the C train, and I saw a worker who was supposed to be picking up trash. Instead of picking it up, just throw it onto the tracks.
Well, I'm not going to go into what an individual worker did or didn't do.
But people have formed these opinions about the workers, so doesn't that hurt your case?
I don't know if it hurts our case, and I'm certainly not convinced that the riding public doesn't realize that transit work is are getting shafted right now by the current MTA leadership, and I certainly don't believe that the riding public thinks that the service cuts that Waldo has engaged in are appropriate.
The service cuts, but in terms of, okay, so let's talk about
Or the layoffs.
Or the layoffs. So let's talk about some of the layoffs. Just you had said, I guess, a couple of months ago that you had made kind of a concession. You had offered the MTA money in return for not going forward with these layoffs. But I think part of it was there would have to be kind of a pledge for no layoffs. Why should the MTA in this environment accept a blanket pledge like that, not to lay off workers?
Well, first of all, to be clear, what we offered didn't necessarily fit into the bill of concession or fit that definition. What we offered was to have Local 100 members, 33,000 Local 100 members employed by the MTA, step up and kick in a few dollars a week to put the folks that were targeted for layoff back on an attrition schedule. And it would have provided the MTA with a very, very significant short-term infusion of cash that they desperately need, allegedly. The MTA refused to do that, and the reason they refused to do it is because they're not interested in a short-term infusion of cash. They're interested in breaking Local 100's contract and extracting significant, what they view as gains out of New York City transit workers.
Well, in terms of gains, aren't they looking for not necessarily, as you say, a short-term infusion of cash, but something long-term, some more long-term stability?
You know, I don't know what goes through the mind of Jay Waldo. I'm sure he is looking for long-term stability, but our position has been clear. Long-term stability is not going to be won off the backs of New York City transit workers. We didn't cause this crisis. We didn't cause the economic meltdown. The state of New York took $143 million of money that was earmarked toward the MTA and put it into their general budget. We didn't do that. Why should transit workers pay the price for moves that the decision makers in this country have made?